Chosen one, stop. Not because I want to control your attention, but because your spirit has been sprinting for so long, it has forgotten what it feels like to stand still without bracing for impact. Pause your scroll like you would pause at the edge of a doorway when you know the next room changes everything. That knot in your stomach, that heaviness pressing on your chest, the strange pressure behind your eyes that feels like tears or thunder or both. It is not proof that you made a mistake. It is not the verdict. It is the aftermath of obedience. It is the sensation of a spiritual severance package being delivered to your body. You made the choice. You walked away. You cut the cord. And now you're looking around, waiting for the sky to clap, waiting for relief to flood in like sunlight after rain, waiting for the confirmation to arrive with trumpets and certainty. But instead, what you hear is a quiet so thick it feels like it has weight. Heaven went completely silent, and that is where the enemy tries to slide his poison into the gap. Because he loves gaps. He loves pauses. He loves any empty space where a chosen one might panic and start filling the silence with self-blame. He whispers, "You ruined it. God has left you. You overreacted. You were too harsh. You misheard. Go back, fix it, apologize, undo it." But I need you to lock this truth in your mind before we go any further. Silence is not always rejection. Sometimes silence is focus. Sometimes silence is precision. Sometimes silence is the sacred quiet of a room where something delicate and holy is happening that cannot be rushed, cannot be noisy, cannot be interrupted. The surgeon is always silent when he is cutting. The teacher is always quietest during the final exam. And right now, chosen one, you are living inside that kind of quiet. You are on the operating table. That choice you made was the incision. And God is silent not because he is angry, not because he is punishing you, not because he is playing games with your heart. He is silent because he is removing something that was killing your destiny. He is working with steady hands. He is cutting clean. He is saving your future with a level of care you cannot fully see yet. Maybe your choice was ending a relationship that kept you spiritually starving, even while you were emotionally attached. Maybe it was quitting a job that was paying you, but also poisoning you, draining you, grinding down your dignity and your peace until you couldn't recognize yourself. Maybe it was blocking that draining person, that family member, that friend who only ever showed up to siphon your light and then call you selfish for trying to breathe. You did exactly what you felt God telling you to do, and you thought the moment you did it, you would immediately feel free. Instead, you feel stunned. You feel exposed. You feel like the atmosphere turned to stone. You're looking for angels singing, and you're hearing nothing. You're looking for a sign, and you're meeting brass. You're looking for warmth, and you're meeting an empty hallway. And your body is reacting like you just stepped into danger. Because when we walk away from what's familiar, even if it was toxic, the nervous system doesn't celebrate at first. It panics. It screams. It asks, "Where is the old noise I depended on, even if it was hurting me?" That panic, that static, that inner storm is the void beginning to form. And the void is not empty because God is absent. The void is empty because God is clearing space. He is evicting the old soundtrack, so a new word can land without being drowned out. So hear this with the calm strength of truth. What you are feeling right now is not a sign to reverse your decision. It is a sign you have crossed a threshold. The silence is not the silent treatment. It is exam room quiet. where the lesson has already been taught, and now your life is answering the question. You prayed for boundaries. You prayed for self-worth. You prayed for a new season. So God allowed a moment where you had to use what you kept asking for. And the moment you used it, the room went quiet. Not because heaven is offended, but because heaven is watching you walk it out. The teacher does not hover over your paper during the test. The teacher trusts that what was placed inside you is enough. In the same way, God is not ignoring you. He is trusting you. He is letting your obedience become muscle, not just a moment. And yes, it can feel like loneliness at first, but it is actually maturity being formed in you. Now let me make you a promise at the doorway of this message. You will not be left in this silence without a map. We are going to talk about what happens next, because the season after the cut is as important as the cut itself. The void is dangerous for one reason. Nature hates a vacuum, and the enemy loves to rush in and fill it with noise. He will try to weaponize your panic, your static thoughts, your late-night spirals, and he will use them like ropes to pull you back to Egypt, back to familiarity, back to what God just removed. That's why I'm going to give you a protocol, a practical vacuum protocol, so you do not get sucked back into the past when your emotions start begging for comfort. And I'm going to give you a defense strategy for the moment the recall signal comes, because it will come. The old door will rattle. The old voice will offer sweeter words. The old system will promise it has changed. But you are not going to be ambushed. You are going to be prepared. You are going to learn how to stabilize your inner world, quiet the panic, and hold the line until the new season fully forms. Stay with me, chosen one. The silence you're sitting in is not the end of your story. It's the room where your next identity is being installed. Doesn't begin with fireworks. It begins with a blade. And the blade is your decision. You didn't just decide something casually, chosen one. You made an incision choice, the kind that slices through attachment, habit, and fear all at once. It might have been a text you finally sent, a resignation you finally submitted, a number you finally blocked, a door you finally closed without leaving it cracked just in case. And the moment you did it, you expected relief to rush in like wind through an opened window. But instead, you felt heaviness drop into the room like a curtain. Your chest tightened. Your stomach sank. Your mind got loud while the world got quiet. It's a strange betrayal of expectation, because you think obedience should feel instantly light, instantly clean, instantly celebrated. But what you often feel first is dread, not because you chose wrong, but because you chose real. This is the shock that hits the nervous system when it realizes the old pattern is no longer available. It's the internal alarm that goes off when the familiar noise is gone, even if that noise was slowly destroying you. The silence that follows isn't gentle at first. It's absolute, almost aggressive in how it exposes everything you were numbing. It makes your car feel like a cage, your bedroom feel like a hallway, your phone feel like a cold stone in your hand. You keep checking for messages, for signs, for proof that God is pleased with you. And the screen stays blank, the air stays still, and the quiet starts to feel personal, like heaven turned its face away. That's exactly when the enemy tries to climb into the quiet and wear it like a mask. Because accusation thrives in silence the way mold thrives in damp corners. He doesn't always attack you with drama. He attacks you with interpretation. He takes the quiet and narrates it. See? You ruined it. God left you. You stepped out of order. You're too emotional. You're too extreme. You always do this. Now you're alone. And if you don't recognize what's happening, you'll start treating the enemy's narration like God's conclusion. You'll replay the moment of the cut like a crime scene, looking for a reason to blame yourself. And then you'll reach for the quickest painkiller available, reversing the decision. You'll want to send the apology you don't owe. You'll want to call the person who proved they didn't protect your heart. You'll want to crawl back into the job that paid your bills but stole your peace. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. Chosen one, let me give you language for what you're experiencing so you don't mislabel it. This is not abandonment. This is not God withdrawing love. This is not heaven punishing you with coldness. This is a severance package. In the natural world, when you leave a system that exploited you, there's paperwork. There's a gap. There's a period where the benefits stop, the routine breaks, and your body doesn't know what's next yet. Spiritually, it works the same way. When you exit what was draining you, there is an adjustment period where the old supply lines are cut, the old distractions disappear, and the soul has to learn a new rhythm. The enemy wants you to think the gap means you failed. God wants you to understand the gap means you're free, even if your emotions haven't caught up to the truth. That's why the operating table is the most accurate picture for this moment. Because surgery is not noisy. Surgery is not rushed. Surgery is not comforting in the way people imagine comfort. Surgery is holy precision in a sterile room, and everyone moves carefully because one wrong movement can reopen a wound. When God cuts something out of your life, He doesn't do it with chaos. He does it with focus. He does it with a silence that protects the work. The surgeon doesn't chat while he's removing what's infected. He concentrates. And God is not silent because He is indifferent. He is silent because He is cutting out what was killing destiny. He is removing the hidden infection, the subtle poison, the relational leak, the pattern that kept you bleeding out in slow motion. He is sealing vessels you didn't know were hemorrhaging. He is closing doors you kept reopening out of guilt. He is pulling roots you kept trimming, wondering why they always grew back. The heaviness you feel is not a sign that the cut was wrong. It's often the sensation of the old attachment dying. The dread is not proof of danger. It's the withdrawal of dependence. The absolute silence is not God's absence. It's God's focus. The kind of focus that says, "Stay still. Let me finish this." Because if you move too fast, if you run back too quickly, you can tear the stitches. If you start negotiating with what God removed, you can reintroduce the infection. And this is why your emotions feel like they're protesting. They're used to being managed by external noise. Now that the noise is gone, the soul has to learn how to stand. So in this section, you're not being asked to feel perfect. You're being asked to hold your position. You're not being asked to prove bravery. You're being asked to practice trust. You're not being asked to manufacture peace. You're being asked to stop interpreting the quiet as rejection. The quiet is the room where your future is being protected. The quiet is the room where your identity is being recalibrated. The quiet is the room where God is doing what you couldn't do with your own hands, separating you from what you loved, but what was not assigned to you, separating you from what was familiar, but not faithful, separating you from what was loud, but not life-giving. So take a breath and stop arguing with the silence, chosen one. Let it be what it is. Not a funeral for your joy, but a procedure for your freedom. You are sitting in your car with the engine off, but your body is still running like it hasn't gotten the memo. Your hands are tight on the steering wheel, not because you're tired, but because your spirit is bracing. The house is right there. The door is right there. Home is right there. Yet you can't move, because you know the moment you step out, the quiet will meet you like a room that's been waiting. This isn't laziness. This isn't weakness. This is the shock of transition. The car has become a small shelter, a thin little borderland between the life you just left and the life you haven't learned to live yet. And in this in-between space, the void feels loud. Not loud with sound, loud with thoughts, loud with memory, loud with that question your mind keeps trying to force into an answer. Did I do the right thing? You expected relief the moment you obeyed, but what arrived first was stillness. And when you've spent years surviving on noise, stillness can feel like danger. The enemy knows that. He doesn't have to break down your door if he can make you afraid of peace. He doesn't have to pull you back with chains if he can pull you back with a story. A lie whispered into the pause. You ruined it. God left you. You overreacted. You're alone now. And if you're not careful, you'll start treating that accusation like truth, just because it's the loudest voice in the silence. Because the truth is, chosen one, obedience has many faces, and yours may have been one of the hardest. Ending a relationship you kept trying to revive, resigning from a job that was consuming you, blocking a family member who knew exactly how to press your guilt buttons like a code. You didn't do this for drama. You didn't do this for attention. You didn't do this because you felt strong that day. You did it because you finally got tired of dying slowly. You did it because God kept putting the same sentence in your spirit, and you couldn't unhear it anymore. You did it because you realized love without respect is not love, and loyalty without peace is not loyalty, and sacrifice that destroys you is not holiness. But when you make that kind of decision, your mind doesn't instantly celebrate. It starts bargaining. It starts replaying every scene, like a lawyer trying to build a case against your freedom. It points to the good moments. It points to the money. It points to the memories. It points to the fear of what's next. And the enemy takes that natural human processing and tries to weaponize it. He doesn't just tempt you to go back. He tempts you to reinterpret your obedience as rebellion. He tempts you to see a boundary as sin. He tempts you to see self-respect as pride. And that is why this moment in the car feels so intense. Because it's not just a pause in your evening. It's a confrontation between two narratives. The old narrative that says you must endure anything to be loved, and the new narrative that says God is training you to walk in truth, even when truth is quiet. Now listen closely, because your body is participating in this spiritual shift too. The tight throat you feel, that sensation like words are stuck in your neck, that's your system adjusting to the fact that you are not going to explain yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. The churning stomach, that hollow burn, that nausea that comes and goes. That's what happens when fear tries to occupy the space where peace is moving in. The racing heart, the sweaty palms, the shallow breathing. That is not always a sign that something is wrong with your decision. Sometimes it's a sign that your nervous system has been trained by instability for so long that stability feels unfamiliar. When you've lived in emotional turbulence, calm feels suspicious. When you've lived in constant reaction, silence feels like abandonment. But the silence is not abandonment. The silence is the first clean air you've breathed in a long time, and your lungs are confused because they forgot what clean air feels like. You're not crazy. You're detoxing. You're recalibrating. You're crossing from survival into stewardship, from coping into clarity, from being managed by people's moods into being led by God's voice. So if you're in that driveway moment right now, frozen, afraid to enter the quiet, I need you to do something simple and holy. Don't negotiate with your obedience. Do not sit there and reopen a door God helped you close. Do not let the void bully you into reverse. The void is not a verdict. The void is a corridor. It is the hallway between what God removed and what God is about to reveal. And yes, it feels empty, but it is empty on purpose. God is clearing space so you stop receiving your identity from chaos. He is clearing space so you stop confusing adrenaline with guidance. He is clearing space so you can finally hear Him without static. And in a moment, we're going to talk about why the static gets so loud after a clean cut, why the enemy sends recall signals, and what you must do to stay anchored when your emotions start craving familiar pain. But for now, breathe. Put your shoulders down, unclench your jaw, and tell your body the truth. I am not in danger. I am in transition. God did not leave me. God is leading me. There's a word that shows up in Scripture that many people skip past because it feels too raw to hold in their mouth. And that word is crushed. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And chosen one, I need you to hear the difference between what heaven means and what trauma assumes. Trauma hears crushed and thinks it means God is finished with you, like a boot on your neck, like a final humiliation. But Scripture uses the word the way a mill uses grain. Crushing is not punishment, it's processing. Crushing is not annihilation, it's preparation. Crushing is not God taking pleasure in your pain, it's God refusing to waste what you've survived. Because there are two kinds of pressure in this world: pressure that destroys and pressure that produces. The enemy wants you to believe all pressure is proof you are cursed. God wants you to understand that some pressure is proof you are being converted into something that can feed others. That's why the psalm doesn't say God is close to those who are perfect, or those who are popular, or those who never struggle. It says He is close to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed in spirit. Meaning this stage you are in is not a sign of His distance. It is a sign of His nearness. It is a sign that when you feel most flattened, most reduced, most unable to perform, heaven is closest, not farthest. The reason you don't feel that closeness yet is because closeness in this season doesn't always feel like comfort. Sometimes it feels like weight being shifted. Sometimes it feels like a hand holding you still while something inside you is being reformed. Sometimes it feels like silence with purpose. Think about what crushing does in the natural. Grain stays grain until it's crushed. Wheat looks whole, impressive, intact, but it can't feed a nation until it's broken down. The flour that becomes bread does not come from a blessing that kept everything untouched. It comes from a process that reduces the grain into something more useful than its original shape. And this is the reframe you must carry like a shield. What feels like you are being reduced is often God increasing your range. What feels like you are being pulverized is often God making you portable, making you distributable, making you able to nourish people you have never even met. Bread for Nations is not about fame. It's not about performing spirituality for applause. It's about utility and calling, chosen one. The kind of usefulness that only comes when the ego stops demanding to be intact. Because the truth is, you can't carry destiny while also insisting on staying the same shape you were in before the cut. Some versions of you were too rigid to travel. Some versions of you were too proud to receive help. Some versions of you were too addicted to being needed to become truly led. So God allows a season where you feel crushed, not to end you, but to convert you. To grind down what was brittle, what was defensive, what was trained to survive by control. To turn you into something softer in the hands of God, but stronger in the world. And this is exactly where the punishment illusion tries to stage its little theater in your mind. Because the moment you feel crushed, your brain starts searching for a culprit. It starts constructing a story that says, "This pain must mean I did something wrong." So you replay the decision. You replay the conversation. You replay the resignation email. You replay the blocking. You replay the boundary. You replay your tone, your wording, the timing, the facial expression, the last message you sent. And while you replay, the enemy sits in the back row like a critic with a notebook, whispering, "See, you're harsh. You're unstable. You're unlovable. You should fix it. You should go back. You should apologize. You should make peace at the expense of truth." He knows that if he can frame your processing as punishment, he can pressure you into reversing what God established. He knows that guilt is one of the fastest ways to reopen a closed door. So he offers you a counterfeit relief. Go back and the crushing stops. But chosen one, that relief is poison in a pretty cup. Because going back doesn't stop the crushing. It just swaps divine processing for demonic erosion. God's crushing creates bread. The enemy's crushing creates dust. God's pressure reshapes you into nourishment. The enemy's pressure grinds you into shame. And you have to learn the difference by the fruit. Divine processing, even when it hurts, pulls you toward clarity, holiness, peace, and alignment. Demonic oppression pulls you toward confusion, self-hatred, compromise, and panic. If the relief requires you to abandon your boundary, betray your healing, or shrink your calling, it is not relief. It is a trap door disguised as comfort. So when the thought comes, "Maybe I should apologize just to end this feeling," pause and ask, "Am I apologizing because I sinned or because I'm scared of silence?" When the urge comes, "Maybe I should reach out, maybe I should explain myself, maybe I should make it smoother," ask, "Am I seeking peace or am I seeking the return of familiar noise?" Because, chosen one, there is a holy difference between repentance and retreat. Repentance is when God convicts you to correct your heart. Retreat is when fear convinces you to undo your breakthrough. Repentance leads to freedom and truth. Retreat leads back to bondage with a fresh coat of paint. And if you're in the crushed stage right now, the goal is not to escape it by crawling backward. The goal is to endure it with understanding, to let God finish the milling, to let the processing complete, to let the flour form. Because the bread is coming, the calling is coming, the usefulness is coming. This is not God punishing you for obedience. This is God saving you from the version of you that could never carry what He promised. Now let this next truth settle into you like a weight that steadies instead of a weight that crushes. There is a kind of silence that only shows up when the lesson is over and the test has begun. You remember this from school, even if you haven't thought about it in years. During the lesson, the teacher explains, repeats, writes on the board, walks between desks, answers questions, corrects mistakes, gives hints, gives examples, gives stories to help you understand. The room has movement, voice, guidance, clarity. But when the test is placed on your desk, everything shifts. The same teacher who was speaking a moment ago goes quiet. Not because they stopped caring, not because they became cruel, not because they want you to fail. They go quiet because the learning has to become yours now. They go quiet because this is the moment where your understanding proves itself. They go quiet because if they keep talking, they interfere. And chosen one, this is what is happening in your spirit right now. God's silence is not the end of relationship. It is the beginning of responsibility. It is the moment where the instruction you received in prayer is no longer theory, it is practice. It is the moment where heaven is watching you apply what you begged for without needing constant reassurance. This is why the quiet feels heavier than you expected. You are not just waiting for God to speak. You are being invited to stand on what He already said. Because you did pray for this, even if you didn't pray for this exact feeling. You prayed for boundaries, but boundaries are not real until they are tested. You prayed for self-worth, but self-worth is not real until it costs you something. You prayed for freedom, but freedom is not real until the familiar door calls your name and you refuse to turn the handle. You asked God to remove what was draining you, and when He gave you the courage to cut it off, you expected immediate peace as proof you did the right thing. Instead, you received a classroom quiet, a test room stillness, a kind of sacred pressure that forces the chosen one to decide what voice will lead them when God is not explaining every step. And this is the part many people misunderstand. Silence is not always God withholding direction. Sometimes it's God watching your direction. Sometimes it is heaven saying, I taught you. I trained you. I strengthened you. Now show me you can walk it without needing to be carried. Not because God is harsh, but because God is building maturity in you. A child needs constant reminders. A soldier must learn to hold position. A chosen one must learn to stay anchored when the atmosphere changes. And that is what this final exam is measuring. Not how loudly you can worship, not how many scriptures you can quote, not how spiritual you can sound, but whether you can obey when you feel alone, whether you can stay clean when temptation is subtle, whether you can keep your boundary when guilt knocks, whether you can keep your peace when the enemy brings back the old soundtrack and tells you to dance. And here is where the stakes rise, because the silence itself isn't the danger, but the vacuum it creates can become dangerous if you fill it with the wrong voice. Nature hates a vacuum. Your mind hates an unanswered question. Your emotions hate uncertainty. So when the room goes quiet, something rushes to become your narrator. If it isn't God, it will be fear. If it isn't truth, it will be accusation. If it isn't peace, it will be panic. This is why the enemy loves the test room silence. He knows the teacher won't speak during the exam, so he tries to become the substitute teacher, sliding in with counterfeit authority. He will interpret the silence as rejection. He will interpret the delay as punishment. He will interpret your discomfort as proof you made the wrong choice. He will say, if God was with you, you'd feel better by now. If you were truly led, you'd have a sign by now. If this was God, it wouldn't hurt. And these lies are designed to do one thing: make you break your own boundary so you can escape the discomfort. Because the enemy doesn't need you to abandon God publicly. He just needs you to abandon your obedience privately. He just needs you to open one door for closure. He just needs you to send one message to be kind. He just needs you to go back one time to check. And the moment you do, the vacuum is no longer empty. It is occupied. And what occupies it begins to shape your next season. So listen, chosen one. This is the exam question beneath all the other noise. Who will you allow to fill the silence? When God stops explaining, will you stand on what He already told you? Or will you demand a new sign every time your emotions tremble? When your nervous system begs for familiar chaos, will you give it chaos? Or will you train it to accept peace as safe? When the old life sends a recall signal, will you treat it like destiny calling you back? Or will you recognize it as the enemy trying to pull you into yesterday's prison with tomorrow's costume? Because the silence can shift into something dangerous if you let it become a canvas for fear. But the same silence becomes holy power if you let it become a sanctuary for trust. The classroom quiet is not designed to shame you. It is designed to reveal what you truly learned. And what you learned, chosen one, is not just information, it is identity. You learned that you are allowed to say no. You learned that love does not require self-betrayal. You learned that peace is worth more than popularity. You learned that obedience is greater than explanation. Now the test is simply asking you to live like you believe it. And I'm telling you, even if you don't feel strong, this is exactly where strength is built. Not in the lesson, but in the quiet after the lesson, when you choose truth without applause. If the silence still feels too sharp to hold, let's walk deeper into it through a scene that has confused believers for centuries. Because it looks like rejection until you understand what it is actually doing. In Matthew 15, a desperate woman cries out to Jesus for mercy, and the text says something that sounds almost unbearable. He answered her not a word. No reassurance, no immediate comfort, no quick miracle to stop the shaking in her voice. Just silence. And if you read that moment with wounded eyes, you might think, so even Jesus ignores people. And the enemy would love for you to stop right there, because he thrives on misreading holy silence as abandonment. But the purpose of that silence was not cruelty. It was not indifference. It was not Jesus withholding love. That silence was a doorway, and the woman kept walking through it. She kept asking. She kept pressing. She refused to let the absence of immediate response become the definition of God's heart. And what emerged from her was not desperation alone. It was authority. Faith with teeth. Persistence with dignity. A kind of spiritual insistence that says, even if the room is quiet, I know who I am speaking to. The silence didn't push her away. It pulled something stronger out of her. It exposed her refusal to be offended out of blessing. It revealed that her trust was not dependent on instant validation. And chosen one, this is why your current silence is not random. God is not trying to break you. He is drawing out what is already in you. the kind of faith that does not collapse when the atmosphere goes quiet, the kind of obedience that does not require constant applause. Now here is the mystery that heals your heart in this season. God can demand a sacrifice while weeping with you during it. Many people assume that if God calls you to cut something off, then he must be emotionally distant from the pain of that cutting. They imagine him like a cold judge, commanding obedience without compassion. But Scripture reveals a God who is near, a God who is close to the crushed, a God who collects tears, a God who grieves what grieves you, even while he leads you through it. This is why you can feel both grief and guidance at the same time. This is why obedience can feel like loss, even when it's saving you. You are not crazy for mourning what you left, even if what you left was wrong for you. You are not faithless because your heart aches. Sometimes the holiest thing you can do is obey while crying. Sometimes the most mature worship is not a song. It's a trembling yes in a silent room. And if you could see heaven's posture toward you right now, you would understand that God is not standing far away with crossed arms. He is close. He is near. He is steady. And his tears do not mean you should go back. His tears mean he understands the cost of forward. That's why the amputation metaphor is painful but accurate. Because amputation is not performed to punish a body. It is performed to save a body. The limb that is infected may still be attached, may still be familiar, may still feel like part of you. But if it carries poison, keeping it is not love. It is slow death. Removing it is mercy, even though it hurts like tragedy. And this is what happens when God calls you to cut off a relationship that was contaminating your identity, a job that was corroding your peace, a connection that was feeding on your spirit. The cut is not a celebration in the moment. It is a procedure. It is a rescue. It is the removal of what would have spread. And yes, there is pain, because the body remembers what was attached. There is phantom sensation, because the soul still reaches for what it used to hold. But the pain does not mean the surgery failed. The pain means you are healing. The pain means nerves are waking up again. The pain means you are alive enough to feel what you used to numb. So when silence tries to convince you that you've been rejected, remember Matthew 15. Sometimes the quiet is not a no, it's an invitation to rise. And when the cost feels too heavy, remember this. God is not only calling you forward, he is staying with you in the cutting, weeping with you, and saving your life at the same time. After the cut, after the quiet, after the moment where you told yourself, this is final, something strange begins to happen that makes many chosen ones doubt their own discernment. You start missing what you just cut off. The mind reaches back. The heart flinches. The body remembers a pattern the spirit already released. And if you don't have language for this, you will misinterpret it as a sign you were wrong. But this is where you must understand the concept of phantom pain, because it is one of the most normal experiences after something has been removed. In the natural world, people can feel a limb that is no longer there. They can itch where there is nothing to scratch. They can ache in a place that has been cut away. The nervous system carries memory. The brain carries pathways. The body carries habit. And spiritually, chosen one, you can feel the same thing. You can miss the call you used to dread. You can long for the attention that used to drain you. You can crave the chaos you begged God to free you from. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. That missing is not proof of misguidance. It is proof of detachment happening in real time. It is the soul learning how to live without a pattern it once depended on, even if that pattern was poison. Phantom pain is expected. It is processing, not prophecy. It is chemistry and memory adjusting, not God calling you back. So do not let longing rewrite your obedience. Do not let nostalgia become a prophet. Because nostalgia can be a liar, and the enemy loves to dress his traps in warm colors, and this is exactly why the next stage feels like a hallway between doors. The old life is behind you, and you know you cannot go back without betraying what God just did in you. But the new life is not fully visible yet, and that gap feels like standing in a corridor with no windows. You closed one door, but the next door hasn't opened. You stepped away from the familiar, but the future hasn't introduced itself. And this in-between space is the most vulnerable stage. Not because God is absent, but because your identity is temporarily unanchored from external reinforcement. In the old season, even if you were miserable, you knew who you were in that misery. You had a role, you had a routine, you had a predictable pain. But in the hallway, you are becoming someone new, and that can feel like floating. This is where your emotions panic and say, at least the old pain was certain. This is where your mind starts romanticizing the past, because uncertainty feels like danger to a nervous system that has been trained by survival. But chosen one, the hallway is not a punishment. The hallway is a transition. It is God clearing space, rearranging timing, rewiring appetite, and building a new kind of stability that is not based on what you can control, but on what you can trust. The hallway is where God teaches you to walk without leaning on crutches you called comfort. The hallway is where you learn that peace is not boredom, it is health. And here is the warning that keeps you safe. Nature hates a vacuum, and the enemy knows it. When the old door closes, the space it leaves behind begs to be filled. If you don't fill it with truth, it will be filled with noise. If you don't fill it with prayer, it will be filled with panic. If you don't fill it with obedience, it will be filled with compromise. The enemy will rush to fill the vacuum with anything loud enough to make you forget why you left. He will send nostalgia as a message. He will send loneliness as a threat. He will send the what-if thoughts like arrows. He will try to make the silence unbearable, so you run back to the nearest sound, even if that sound is bondage. He doesn't need you to love the old life again. He only needs you to fear the hallway more than you fear the prison. And that is why you must treat this stage with reverence, chosen one. Do not decorate the hallway with old memories like they are invitations. Do not keep the key to the old door in your pocket, just in case. Do not let phantom pain become permission. The aching is real, but it is not instruction. The emptiness is real, but it is not abandonment. The hallway is real, but it is not forever. God is teaching you how to stand in the gap without being swallowed by it. Because the chosen one, who can survive the hallway without filling it with noise, becomes the chosen one who can carry the next door when it opens. By the time you reach this stage, you realize the enemy doesn't always need external chaos to break you, because he can build a war zone inside a perfectly quiet room. You can be sitting on your bed with the lights off, phone face down, house silent, and yet your mind sounds like a crowded highway at rush hour. Thoughts loop like a song stuck on the worst chorus. Scenes replay, conversations rewind. Imaginary futures stack up like storm clouds. What if I can't make it? What if I'm alone? What if I ruined my life? What if God was disappointed? What if nothing opens? What if I'm forgotten? What if they win? What if I lose everything? And the more you try to calm down, the louder it gets, because you're wrestling the noise with more noise. This is the internal war zone, chosen one, and it's one of the most confusing places to be. Because on the outside, your life looks still, but on the inside, your nervous system is sprinting as if something is chasing you. This is where people mislabel the problem. They think the problem is the decision, so they try to undo the decision. They think the problem is the silence, so they try to fill the silence. They think the problem is God, so they accuse heaven of being distant. But the deeper issue is often simpler and more technical than it feels. You are trying to receive a message from God while your system is tuned to the wrong frequency. Because your mind and body have modes, and those modes matter more than most people realize. There is a state that can be described as high beta, which is essentially the survival channel, scanning for threats, running calculations, preparing for impact, rehearsing disasters so you won't be surprised, living on adrenaline, living on urgency. High beta is useful when you need to react quickly to a real danger. It's the channel your body uses when you're avoiding a car accident, escaping harm, or solving something under pressure. But when you stay in that channel for too long, it becomes a jammer. It floods your inner world with static. It makes your thoughts brittle and fast. It makes your breathing shallow. It makes your spiritual ears dull. It doesn't just create anxiety, it creates interference. You can still pray, but your prayer feels like it bounces off the ceiling. You can still read scripture, but it feels like words sliding off glass. You can still worship, but it feels mechanical, like you're doing the motions while your mind is planning escape routes. That's not because God is far. It's because high beta is a loud room, and you're trying to hear a whisper over a siren. And then there is a different state, often described as theta, a calmer channel where imagination, imagery, creativity, and deep stillness live. Theta is where the mind becomes spacious instead of crowded. It is where thoughts slow down enough for wisdom to rise. It is where pictures form, insight lands, and conviction becomes clear without panic. It is the state people often drift into right before sleep, or during deep prayer, or when they are truly present and not performing. In theta, you don't have to chase revelation, it arrives. In theta, you don't have to force clarity, it surfaces. In theta, your spirit can sense what your anxiety was drowning out. And this is why the enemy fights so hard to keep you in high beta after the cut, because he knows if you slip into theta, the hallway becomes bearable. The void becomes sacred. The silence becomes guidance. The fear loses its grip. He knows that the moment your system quiets, you will start to recognize patterns you couldn't see before. You will feel the peace that confirms your decision, and you will stop being easy to manipulate. So he keeps you in the survival channel, not necessarily by sending new problems, but by making you rehearse old problems until your body believes the threat is still present. This is why your crisis can be framed as a signal mismatch. You are trying to receive a theta message, a gentle, clear, spirit-led instruction, while you're tuned to a beta channel that is optimized for threat detection, not divine intimacy. You are trying to hear God's steady voice through an internal megaphone screaming danger. You are trying to perceive direction while your mind is sprinting in circles. And then you blame yourself for not hearing. You blame God for not speaking. You blame the decision for not working, when the real issue is that your receiver is jammed. It's like trying to pick up a soft radio station while standing next to a construction site. The station is broadcasting. The problem is the interference. And chosen one, this is not a character flaw. This is not you being weak. This is your nervous system doing what it was trained to do for years, because survival trained you to stay alert. Trauma trained you to expect the other shoe to drop. Toxic environments trained you to read moods, predict explosions, anticipate disappointment. So when you finally leave, your body doesn't instantly relax. It keeps scanning because it doesn't trust peace yet. It treats silence like the calm before a storm. It keeps you in high beta because it thinks it's protecting you. But protection becomes prison when it never turns off. So the invitation in this section is not just stop thinking, because no one can command a nervous system into calm by yelling at it. The invitation is to recognize the channel you're in and stop making spiritual conclusions based on survival state emotions. If you feel far from God while you're in high beta, don't interpret it as abandonment. Interpret it as interference. If your mind is producing worst-case futures, don't interpret it as prophecy. Interpret it as a threat-scanning habit looking for something to do. If the room is quiet, but you feel war, don't assume the war is outside. Understand the war is the signal mismatch inside. And once you can name it, you can change it. Once you can see it, you can step out of it. Because God is not asking you to perform perfect peace. He is asking you to come into alignment, to tune your inner world to the frequency where His voice can be received without static. And as we move forward, you're going to learn how to shift states, how to calm the jammer, how to protect the vacuum from noise, and how to stop letting high beta make decisions for a destiny that was never meant to be led by panic. This next movement shows you the mercy of a practical solution. Because God is not only a God of revelation, He is a God of wisdom. And wisdom often looks like a tool that helps you obey when your emotions are too loud to cooperate. When your system is stuck in that high beta survival channel, telling you to be still can feel like telling a storm to fold itself into a neat napkin. You might want to be calm. You might even pray sincerely. But the body is buzzing. The mind is running. Your thoughts are ricocheting from worst-case future to worst-case future like a pinball machine with no off switch. So instead of shaming yourself for not being instantly peaceful, you need to understand that God sometimes gives you what I call mechanical stillness. A bridge into calm that doesn't require you to win a mental wrestling match. This is where the tuning fork illustration becomes more than a metaphor. It becomes a map. When you strike a tuning fork, it vibrates at a specific frequency. Bring it close to another tuning fork tuned to the same note, and something happens that feels almost like magic. The second fork begins to vibrate too, even if you never touched it. One frequency awakens the other. That is entrainment. It's resonance. It's alignment by proximity. The point is simple but powerful. You don't always have to force your system into a new state by sheer willpower. Sometimes you can expose your system to a steady frequency long enough that your inner world starts to match it. And chosen one, this is what many people have been missing. You keep trying to produce peace while surrounded by noise, while consuming noise, while letting noise narrate your life. Then you blame yourself when peace won't arrive. But peace isn't just an emotion. Peace is a climate. Peace is a frequency. And when God calls you into a new climate, He also teaches you how to breathe there. So when I say spiritual tuning fork, I'm talking about a practical entrainment tool, specifically audio designed to help your nervous system shift out of the jammed, frantic state and into a quieter channel where prayer becomes natural again. It is not a replacement for God. It is not a shortcut around obedience. It is not a superstition. Think of it as training wheels for your nervous system. Think of it as a stable signal you can sit beside until your internal static begins to settle. Because one of the enemy's most effective strategies is to keep you so anxious that you can't stay still long enough to hear God, then accuse you for not hearing. He keeps you running, then mocks you for being tired. He keeps you flooded, then tells you you're weak. But when you understand entrainment, you stop arguing with your nervous system like it's your enemy. You start shepherding it. You start giving it a steady reference point. You start saying, "Body, you don't get to lead this season with panic. You are safe now. We are learning stillness." And that is why an audio entrainment tool can become a gift in this hallway between doors season. It helps you practice being still without needing perfect conditions, without needing your mind to cooperate instantly, without needing your emotions to stop being emotional. It helps you come down out of the war zone and into a sanctuary. Now let's anchor this spiritually, so you understand the purpose clearly. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Notice the order. It does not say, "No, and then you'll be still." It says, "Be still and know." Stillness is not a reward for spiritual maturity. Stillness is a doorway to spiritual perception. Knowing is on the other side of stillness. But if you are overwhelmed, if your nervous system is buzzing, if your mind is in loops, you cannot access that knowing easily. Not because you are unloved, but because you are overstimulated. And overstimulation is a form of bondage. It keeps you reacting. It keeps you scanning. It keeps you thirsty for signs. It keeps you interpreting every silence as danger. That's why stillness is not just a nice idea. Stillness is warfare. Stillness is an act of obedience. Stillness is how you starve the enemy of the panic fuel he uses to move you backwards. When you become still, you interrupt the cycle. You stop feeding the loops. You stop feeding the catastrophe rehearsal. You stop feeding the recall signal. You create space for God's voice to land. And because the psalm links stillness with knowing, you can understand why the enemy hates it. Stillness produces clarity, and clarity produces authority. So here is what mechanical stillness looks like in practice, chosen one. And keep it simple, because simplicity is what breaks the enemy's complexity. You choose a time, even 2 minutes, where you sit without scrolling, without multitasking, without trying to solve your future. You put your body in a posture of surrender, shoulders down, jaw unclenched, hands open, breath slow, as if you are telling your nervous system, "We are not running right now." You turn on the spiritual tuning fork, the steady audio that is designed to help your brain and body shift toward calm. Then you do not demand immediate fireworks. You do not judge yourself every 5 seconds. You simply stay near the frequency. You let it resonate. You let it pull you toward stillness, the way a river pulls leaves toward its center. You let your thoughts pass, like cars on a road, without chasing them. You let your body learn what safety feels like, without adrenaline. And you may find, slowly at first, that prayer becomes less like shouting into a storm and more like speaking in a quiet room. You may notice that you can finally feel God's nearness again. Not because He moved closer, but because the static moved away. And from that place, obedience becomes easier. Boundaries become steadier. The urge to go back becomes weaker. The hallway becomes less threatening. Because you're no longer trying to receive a theta message on a beta channel. You're tuning the receiver. You're clearing interference. You're practicing Psalm 46:10, not as a quote, but as a rhythm. Be still and know. Be still and remember. Be still and stay. Be still and let God finish what He started. As you begin to practice stillness and your inner static starts to thin, you might expect the next stage to feel like immediate peace, like a clean exhale that never gets interrupted again. But often what comes next is something far more honest and far more human. Withdrawal. And I'm naming it on purpose, chosen one, because what you can name, you can manage. Withdrawal is the emotional detox that happens when your nervous system loses access to an old dopamine pattern, even if that pattern was toxic. For a long time, your brain received little chemical rewards from the very things that drained you. Chaos gave you adrenaline. Uncertainty gave you anticipation. Attention gave you a rush. Conflict gave you a strange sense of aliveness, even when it hurt. Being needed gave you significance, even when it exhausted you. People-pleasing gave you relief, even when it erased you. So when you finally cut the cord, the spirit may feel lighter, but the body can feel restless. The brain can feel bored, jittery, irritable, sorrowful for reasons it can't explain. You can wake up and miss someone who never protected you. You can crave a job that was slowly breaking your health. You can want to hear from the person who always came back, only to take more. And that craving can feel so convincing that you assume it must be a sign. But it's not a sign. It's a symptom. It's your system recalibrating. It's the chemistry of a former bondage losing its grip. It's your appetite changing, and appetite changes always feel like hunger before they feel like health. This is where the Bible gives you a mirror so you don't feel ashamed for being human. In Numbers 11, the Israelites are free from Egypt, free from slavery, free from the whip, free from the system that crushed them, and yet they begin to complain. They start talking about the food they ate in Egypt. They remember the fish, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic, and they speak as if the menu matters more than freedom. It's a stunning picture, not because they were evil, but because they were detoxing. Their bodies were out of Egypt, but their appetite still had Egypt in it. Their identity was being rewritten, but their memory was selective. They didn't remember the chains with the same intensity as they remembered the flavors. They didn't remember the humiliation with the same tenderness as they remembered the familiarity. And that is exactly how the brain works when it's uncomfortable in new freedom. It starts romanticizing the parts that felt predictable, because predictability feels safe to a nervous system trained by survival. It's not that Egypt was good, it's that Egypt was known. It's not that slavery was pleasant, it's that slavery was familiar. And when freedom feels like a hallway, the mind starts craving the prison, simply because the prison has furniture you recognize. That is the Egypt memory, chosen one. And it is one of the most dangerous illusions of this season, because it uses truth fragments to pull you backward. Yes, there were good moments. Yes, there were laughs. Yes, there were benefits. Yes, there were times you felt seen. But the question is never, were there any good moments? The question is, was it assigned? Was it healthy? Was it holy? Was it building your destiny or bleeding it? Egypt can feed you and still enslave you. Egypt can comfort you and still consume you. Egypt can be familiar and still be fatal. So here is your instruction, and it is both compassionate and firm. Validate your grief, but do not interpret withdrawal as a sign to return. Grief is not rebellion. Grief is your heart acknowledging that something ended. Even when you leave what is wrong, you can still mourn the version of yourself that tried so hard to make it work. You can mourn the dream you attached to that relationship. You can mourn the future you imagined in that job. You can mourn the fantasy of being understood by that family member. You can mourn the time you invested. You can mourn the hope you carried. And God is not offended by that mourning. He is close to the brokenhearted. But grief becomes dangerous when it starts issuing instructions. Grief must be honored, not obeyed. Withdrawal must be witnessed, not worshipped. You can say, "This hurts," without saying, "I should go back." You can say, "I miss them," without saying, "They were good for me." You can say, "I feel lonely," without saying, "I must reopen the door." Because loneliness is a feeling, not a compass. Craving is a sensation, not a calling. Nostalgia is a story, not a prophecy. And in this stage, you must train your mind to tell the full truth, not the selective truth. When your brain starts listing the garlic and onions of your Egypt, you must also remember the bricks without straw. When your mind starts replaying the sweet messages, you must also remember the nights you cried and felt unseen. When your emotions start craving the familiar rush, you must also remember the cost you paid to keep that rush in your life. This is why chosen ones need a sacred honesty in withdrawal, because the enemy will try to turn your cravings into counsel. He will dress your discomfort in spiritual language and call it a sign. But chosen one, a sign from God does not lead you back into the same cage you begged Him to open. A sign from God doesn't require you to shrink. A sign from God doesn't demand self-betrayal. The discomfort you feel right now is not proof you're wrong. It's proof you're detoxing. It's proof the old pattern is losing oxygen. It's proof you are learning how to live without chains, even if the skin where the chains used to be still feels tender. So when you feel the withdrawal wave rise, don't panic. Don't rush to fix it by reversing your obedience. Sit with it. Breathe through it. Use the stillness tools. Speak truth to your system. Remind yourself that Egypt always tastes better in memory than it did in real life. Remind yourself that freedom feels unfamiliar before it feels normal. Remind yourself that God didn't bring you out to send you back. He brought you out to rebuild you in the wilderness, where appetites change, where identity forms, where faith becomes muscle, and where the promised land stops being an idea and starts becoming your direction. Now we arrive at the moment where everything you've heard stops being information and becomes installation. Because chosen one, understanding is powerful, but agreement is what seals. So let this conclusion move you from surviving the silence to being commissioned in it. Shift your posture in a way your body can understand, because the body often needs a signal that a new chapter is beginning. Sit up. Plant your feet. Let your shoulders drop. Place one hand over your heart if you can, not as a ritual for show, but as a quiet declaration that you are present and you are no longer running. In your mind's eye, step into a sterile white room, not cold, not empty, but clean. protected, uncluttered. The kind of room where precision happens and contamination cannot survive. Let it feel like safety. Let it feel like holy focus. This is the room where God did the cutting. This is the room where the procedure happened. This is the room where your destiny was protected from infection. And as you stand in that inner space, agree with what God already did. Don't beg Him to undo the past. Don't ask for permission to go backward. Don't negotiate with your obedience. Simply agree. What was removed for a reason. What was severed for my life. What was cut off was cutting me down. Agreement is not denial of pain. Agreement is refusal to interpret pain as failure. Agreement is the chosen one saying, even if my emotions are still adjusting, my spirit knows this was necessary. And in that agreement, the silence stops feeling like abandonment and starts feeling like authority being transferred. From that place, let your mouth speak what your spirit has been learning. Because declarations are not magic words. They are alignment words. They teach your mind what to believe when fear tries to teach you something else. So speak it plainly, like a verdict in a courtroom. The incision is sealed. What God cut, you will not reopen. The soul tie is broken. What fed on your attention, your guilt, your empathy, your loyalty, it no longer has permission to access you. Panic is bound. Not because you will never feel emotion again, but because emotion will no longer sit on the throne and make decisions for you. A sound mind is released. Clarity is released. Peace is released. Discernment is released. And every recall signal is rebuked because you now recognize the pattern. The enemy will send the perfect message at the wrong time. The sweet apology wrapped around the same poison. The sudden offer that feels like relief but would cost you your freedom. And you are not ignorant anymore. You are not surprised anymore. You are not easily pulled by nostalgia anymore. When the recall signal comes, you will not treat it like destiny. You will treat it like a test you were trained to pass. Because you did not walk through the hallway between doors just to run back into the room God rescued you from. And now, chosen one, the conclusion becomes a question. Not because God is uncertain, but because covenant requires consent. Will you stand in the void without demanding signs? Will you remain steady in the hallway without decorating it with fear? Will you allow the silence to stay sacred long enough for God's next instruction to arrive in clarity rather than in panic? This is the moment where the upgrade is sealed, not by feelings, not by external proof, but by willingness. Because the chosen one who can wait without spiraling becomes the chosen one who can lead without controlling. The chosen one who can be still without being entertained becomes the chosen one who can hear God without static. And when you say yes to standing without signs, you are not resigning yourself to emptiness. You are consenting to maturity. You are letting your faith become substance instead of sentiment. You are letting obedience become identity instead of a one-time moment. So close this with stillness, because the final seal is not noise, it is rest. Sit with your freedom for 60 seconds. Don't rush to check your phone. Don't rush to fix anything. Don't rush to prove anything. Let your breathing slow. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. Let the quiet be clean. And if a thought tries to intrude, Let it pass like a cloud that doesn't own the sky. In this 60 seconds, you are teaching your nervous system a new truth. Peace is safe. Silence is safe. Freedom is safe. The old pattern is gone, and you are not going to resurrect it with panic. Stay there, chosen one, just long enough to feel the new climate touch your skin. And when the minute is done, let one sentence land like the final stitch. The surgery is complete.